All right, y'all, welcome to the show. This is Church and State with Spencer Sanderson. I'm your host, Spencer Sanderson. And whenever, wherever, and however you're listening, it is an honor to be a part of your day. So, in the last episode, we started the story of Jacob and Esau in Genesis. And just to recap, before we get into today's material, Jacob and Esau were two brothers that were both born to Rebekah. Esau ended up selling his birthright to Jacob in exchange for food. And then he later married a Canaanite woman, which brought a lot of grief onto his family, specifically Rebekah. So Jacob ends up having to flee from Esau after he deceived Isaac and stole Esau's blessing away from him. And he stays from Laban, who is Rebekah's brother. So it's Jacob's uncle. He has numerous children, and he falls in love with Laban's youngest daughter, whose name is Rachel. Jacob ends up becoming very wealthy, and Laban begins to have sort of a sour attitude towards Jacob. He doesn't like all the wealth he's accumulating as he sees that Jacob has taken some things from him. So Jacob takes his household and all of his wives, all of his possessions, and he flees. And right now, Jacob is under the assumption that Esau is out to kill him. So where we begin, we pick back up in Genesis 31 at the same spot we left off. So after Jacob flees, on the third day that Jacob is gone, Laban was finally made aware that Jacob had fled. So he took off after Jacob, and it's written that he pursued Jacob for 7 days until he finally caught up to him in a hill country in a place called Gilead, or it might be Gilead. It's either Gilead or Gilead. And on this journey, God visits Laban in a dream, and he says to him in verse 24, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, good or bad." So he's telling Laban, have a pretty neutral attitude when you go into this. Don't do anything to make Jacob angry, and don't immediately try to curry favor with Jacob. Don't go into this in a good way. Don't go into this in a bad way. So Laban ends up arriving at Jacob's camp, and he decides to set up camp there as well. So Laban immediately confronts Jacob in verse 26 through 30 and says, "What in the world have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me?" Which, honestly, this is kind of the pot calling the kettle black here, because the whole reason that Jacob flees from Laban, it's number one, because Laban had a sour attitude, but number two, we went over in last episode where Laban deceived Jacob by giving a different daughter of his to be married to Jacob. So he has deceived Jacob already, but he's angry that Jacob has quote unquote deceived him. He says, "Why did you not tell me you were leaving so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You've done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.'" And already failed at that. Good job, Laban. Don't say anything to Jacob, good or bad. What does Laban do? He immediately confronts Jacob and just starts absolutely ripping into him. So Laban is not a good follower of directions. And he says, "Now you've gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?" If you remember in the last episode, right before they left, Rachel went into Laban's house, and she stole his household gods, which were items that were very important to Laban, that he worshipped as gods, that he thought were crucial for him to own. So Rachel came in and took those, and now he's asking Jacob, "Look, I understand you got up and left because you wanted to return to your father's household, but why did you steal my stuff?" And Jacob replies that, "Well, I was worried that you were going to take your daughters back by force. I was worried that you were going to take all these things back because you were angry with me. You had a sour attitude. So it was my discernment at the time that you wanted to do me harm and take away the things you've given me. So I fled." But he also adds, "Look, I didn't steal your gods. I don't know if anyone stole your gods, but if they've been stolen, whoever took them should be put to death." Y'all see the problem here. It's Jacob's wife, the woman that he loves most dearly, who stole Laban's gods, but she didn't tell Jacob. Jacob has no idea. So he's saying, yeah, whoever took them, put them to death. And Rachel's over there like, oh, maybe not. Maybe let's not do that because I may or may not have them currently in my possession. So this obviously worries Rachel. And then, like I said, Jacob has no idea what she's done. So Laban ends up going through the entire camp and searching. He flips over every pillow, turns over every blanket, look and see where they might be. And then he comes to Rachel's tent. But Rachel kind of plays a lie with Laban. She has all of the household gods stored in this saddle. It was a saddle she took off an animal, and she has all of Laban's possessions wrapped up in this saddle. And she's currently sitting on the saddle, and Laban comes in. He's like, "All right, get up, let me see." And she says, "Well, I can't. I'm sorry. Like I'm having my period right now. I'm in great pain. I can't bring myself to stand up." So Laban, he's like, "Okay, sure. I'm not going to make you do that." So he searches the rest of the tent, doesn't find anything. And now it's Jacob's turn to kind of turn the heat on Laban. He just got an earful from Laban. He's going to give an earful back. And in verse 36, he says, "Look, I have been with you now for 20 years. Your sheep and goats have never miscarried. I've taken care of them well, nor have I eaten any of the rams from your flock. And I didn't bring you any animals torn by wild beasts." Basically saying, look, everything I've done for you has been good. I've taken care of everything you've entrusted to me. Everything that you've mercifully given to me, I've treated well. I have done nothing to harm you. So essentially, what is your deal? And Laban kind of concedes to that. And he's like, "Well, sure, I guess. But, what can I do now?" So y'all might be guessing, what can they do? And if you follow the theme of Genesis, what we've learned so far, what do you think they do? If your guess is they make a covenant, you are spot on. So they decide to make a covenant, and right there, Jacob takes a bunch of stones and he crafts a pillar. And here are the terms of the covenant that they outline to each other. They say that, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me while we're away from each other." This is Laban talking. So, "May the Lord grace us and protect us. If you mistreat my daughters or take any wives other than them, even though no one is with us, even though I don't see it, remember that God is a witness, and God does see. This pillar that we're in front of right here is a witness. I won't go past this side of the pillar to harm you, and you better not come on this side of the pillar to try and harm me." And then he ends it again, repeating, "May God be a witness to us." So Jacob, he swears to abide by the covenant, and he swears on the name of his father Isaac, a man who he loves very deeply. Obviously, it's his father, it's family. So he swears on Isaac's name that he will abide by the covenant. And then, as most people do after making a cordial agreement, they made a feast and ate a meal there. I feel like that's a lot of the culture that we see in the South right here. When you kiss and make up, what do? All right, let's go eat. Let's go grab lunch. Let's go have a barbecue. Let's party. So they have a meal. They spend the night there, and then the next morning, Laban, he kisses his grandchildren and his daughters, and Laban goes on his merry way. So we get to Genesis 32. And this is when Jacob tries to reach out to Esau. He sends out some messengers to Esau. So the chapter starts with Jacob kind of going on his way, and the angels of God met him. And it's not super specific what the angels said at this time, but the angels came upon Jacob, and he proclaims that this where we are right here is the camp of God. And he names the place Menaheim, which if you translate Menaheim, it might be Monaheim, how they pronounce it, but it's Menaheim. And in Hebrew, this means, it means two camps. So this is my camp, and this is also God's camp. So two camps, Menaheim. And then he decides to send messengers to Esau, and this is what he tells to the messengers. He says, "You need to go tell Esau, I've been staying with Laban, and I've remained there until now. I've got cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, and servants. I'm sending this message to you so that I might find favor in your eyes." So the messengers go out, they go meet Esau, and they deliver this message, and they come back, and they're like, "Okay, Jacob, we've got a reply for you. Here's what it says. Esau's on his way, and he's bringing 400 men with him." So Jacob's like, "Ugh, that ain't what I wanted to hear." What you remember, Jacob's grandfather Abram, whenever Lot was in trouble, he mustered 300 men to go rescue Lot and fight. So he's hearing now that Esau's on his way with 400 folks. He's like, "There's a storm coming. This might not." I might not be finding favor with Esau today. Sounds like he's out for blood and I'm the target. So Jacob decides to split his camps into two groups so that if Esau comes after them and attacks, maybe half of what he has, one of the other camps, can make a run for it and escape. And I think it's interesting that earlier in the passage, he names the place Manaheim, meaning two camps. And now he's splitting his camp into two. So, very neat, subtle bit of foreshadowing there. Jacob splits his camp into two groups, and then he prays to God, basically saying, look, I'm unworthy of everything you've given me. Thank you for all of your mercy. Thank you for all of your wonderful blessings and faithfulness. Please protect me from my crazy brother who's on his way with what I can only assume is an army that's going to attack us. And Jacob, he reminds God that, look, you made a promise to me that I would be prosperous. Now's the time to kind of deliver on that, which it's pretty bold of Jacob to kind of remind God of something that he says. Like, remember, God, you've got this covenant with me. Hope you abide by it, as if God would ever lie, as if God would ever go back on his word. But Jacob is just in panic mode right now. He's trying to hedge his bets and make sure that he's protected. But he decides to make a gift for Esau, and the gift is pretty extensive. It's written that he prepared 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 female sheep, 20 male sheep, 30 female camels, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. So, if anybody watching this wants to get me something for Christmas, there's your standard. Better get me a lot of livestock. He hands this herd over to his servants, and he orders them, look, go on ahead of me, so that the first thing Esau sees is this massive gift. So go on your way, go out and meet him, and try and keep some space in between the herds. Because if he attacks, you don't need to have everything concentrated in one place. So try and keep some space between y'all. And Jacob tells the messenger that's with his servant, if Esau asks, who are you? What are you doing here? And why do you have like 500 something animals with you? Tell them these belong to your brother Jacob. They are meant as a gift for you, and Jacob is on his way behind me. So Jacob says the exact same thing to the other servants. Say, hey, if you come across Esau, tell him this. And his hope is that by presenting this gift, Esau is going to have a bit of a calmer attitude. It's written in the New International Version of the Bible that he was hoping that these gifts would pacify Esau, take away his aggression, make it to where he was a lot less likely to attack. So that night, Jacob decides to send all of his household and all of his possessions on across the stream, and for a moment, he's left completely by himself. And it's written that a man wrestled with him until daybreak. He was wrestling with somebody, kind of fighting him, struggling with him. And the man was unable to easily overcome Jacob. They fought for a long time. So the man reaches out and he touches the socket of Jacob's hip, which caused his hip to wrench, and that kind of incapacitated Jacob for a bit. And the man says to him, look, just let me go. Sun's coming up. Let me go. And Jacob's like, I ain't letting you out of here until you bless me. What you're thinking of, if I just fought with somebody, if I was just wrestling with somebody for hours upon hours, would the first thing out of my mouth be, hey, bless me before you go? And be like, no, you get out of here. Quit attacking me. But he says, I won't let you go until you bless me. And the man asks, who are you? And Jacob's like, I'm Jacob. I'm Jacob, the son of Isaac. I'm the grandson of Abraham. That's who I am. So the man, he replies to Jacob. This is in verse 28. And this is a super important verse in Genesis. He said, your name will no longer be Jacob. It will now be Israel, because you've struggled with God and humans and have overcome. So that's a clue that the man that Jacob was wrestling with was a manifestation of God. He fought God overnight, directly wrestled with him. So now Jacob has become Israel, and Jacob asks who the man's name is, and the man refuses, but he blesses Jacob. And after this, he gives a name to the place, and the name is Peniel. And if you translate that to Hebrew, it means the face of God. And Jacob says, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. Because in the Old Testament, if you ever saw God's face, you would die on the spot. You'll see this in Exodus when Moses and Aaron are allowed a glimpse of God, but they see him from behind. They don't see his face. But Jacob saw the face of God and he lived. And a pretty neat cultural fact is that to this day, the Israelites, they do not eat the tendon that's attached to the hip socket of any animal, because that's the same socket on Jacob's hip that God touched. So it's very holy for the Israelites and for the Jewish people not to eat that tendon. So when we move into Genesis chapter 33, this is when Jacob finally reunites with Esau. They come face to face, and here's how this goes. Jacob looks up and he sees Esau coming over the hill with 400 men approaching. So Jacob walks right up to Esau and he bows down to him 7 times, just thinking, please don't hurt me. Please spare me. I'm so sorry. I'm humbled by your presence. Please don't hurt me. And Esau, he runs forward after Jacob bows. He runs forward and he embraces him and kisses him. And after that, they both just completely break down. It's written that they wept. And then Jacob's wives and Jacob's children, they also came forward and they bowed to Esau. And Esau very humbly says, look, I appreciate all the gifts that you have for me, all these livestock, but I don't want them. I don't want them, because Esau says, I already have plenty of favor, my brother. That favor being that his relationship with Jacob can be restored. He sees his brother again. His brother is doing well. That's enough for him. That completely warms Esau's heart. So Esau, he offers to accompany Jacob on his journey, but Jacob's like, no, you can go on ahead. We've obviously got a lot of animals here, since you don't want to take them, I'm going to have to take care of them. So Jacob says, you go on ahead. I'm going to walk these animals, because a lot of the animals were very young and the mothers were still nursing their young. So if he walked the animals too hard and made them physically exert themselves too much, it was a risk that the animals would die of exhaustion, that they would pass away. So he tells Esau to go on ahead, and then Esau moves on to Seir, but Jacob splits off and he goes to a place called Succoth and settled there for a little bit, but then he makes his way to Shechem, which is a place that is in the land of Canaan. So Jacob has made it to the land of Canaan. And then the father of Shechem, whose name is Hamor, because Shechem is also a person's name. Shechem's father, Jacob, buys a piece of land from him. He paid 400 pieces of silver to buy a property, and he ends up pitching a tent and setting an altar up there. And the place that he sets up the altar is named El Elohe Israel, which, if you translate that to Hebrew, means mighty is the God of Israel. In Genesis 34, things get a little dark. So Dinah, who is the daughter of Leah, who was Jacob's first wife, she goes out to visit the women of the land and to converse. And then while she's there, Shechem, who's the son of Hamor, he sees her, he finds beauty in her, and he takes her and he rapes her. And then he goes to his father Hamor and says, I need this woman to be my wife. Make it happen. And when Jacob hears about this, he is absolutely infuriated. But since his sons were out working in the fields, he wasn't going to do anything about it until they came home and until he told them about it. And then during this, Hamor, he comes and talks to Jacob, and he's like, hey, my son, he wants one of your daughters to be his wife. What do you think about that? Are you cool with that? And during this conversation, Jacob's sons, who are Dinah's brothers, they find out about what happened, and they are just overcome with rage. So Hamor is pleading for Jacob to give over Dinah to be his son's wife, and he's like, look, name your price. I will give you whatever you want if you hand over Dinah to be Shechem's wife. So Jacob's sons pipe in and they say to Hamor, okay, look, we're not going to be able to hand her over to someone who's uncircumcised, but we're going to give her to you on one condition. You need to circumcise all of your males, every male in your city, every male in your household, and then we'll give her to you. And then we'll basically just be one people. We will live among you in harmony and unity, because as y'all remember, since Abraham, there's now the tradition that every male in the household has to be circumcised in order to be part of the people. And they say, look, if you don't agree, we're going to take dinner and we're going to go. So Shechem, he returns to the city and he passes on these instructions to the men of the city, and then everyone was circumcised. So everything should be good, right? Wrong. 3 days later, all the men were still in great pain because of the procedure. So 2 of Jacob's sons, whose names are Simeon and Levi, they took their weapons, they went into the city, and they slaughtered every single male in the city. And they also slaughtered Shechem and Hamor. So they go on an absolute warpath and kill everybody. And the rest of Jacob's sons come in, they loot the bodies, they pillage the houses, and they carry off all the women and the children to be with them. And then Jacob goes to Simeon and Levi. He's like, what in the world did y'all do? I thought we had an agreement. You have completely tarnished my name among the Canaanites, and you've also made me an enemy. And now, if everyone else in the land of Canaan wanted to rise up and attack us, we are far too outnumbered to defend yourself. Jacob's basically saying, you have doomed us to die and to be ravaged based off what you did. And the brothers reply, a great reply, very bluntly, well, they shouldn't have treated Dinah like a prostitute. Shechem all of this could be avoided if Shechem didn't take Dinah and force himself upon her. He's like, well, they started it and we reacted. So we get to Genesis 35, where God tells Jacob to go up to Bethel and to set up an altar. And Jacob does so. And then he gathers all of his household and he says, look, God is with us. The Lord is with us. Any foreign god that you have among you, anything you have that you worship, or any sort of other pagan gods, renounce those, get rid of your foreign gods, and you need to all purify yourselves. That includes the clothes you're wearing. You need to be purified. They obey Jacob and they set out. And it's written that along the journey, the terror of God fell on all the towns around them so that no one pursued them. Another common theme here is that a lot of people are able to tell when God is with somebody. They saw that the Lord was with Jacob and that God was behind them. So they were like, we're not opening up that can of worms. We're not going to go over there and touch Jacob, because he has a greater power behind him, and we will suffer greatly if we try to do that. So they were able to walk throughout the land completely unbothered without getting attacked at all. But on the journey, a woman named Deborah, who was Rebekah's nurse, she died and they buried her there. And God appears to Jacob another time, and he reaffirms that his name shall be Israel. And in verse 11 through 12, he says to Jacob, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave Abraham and Isaac, I will also give to you, and this land will be the land of your descendants long after you. And after this, God is just, he's reaffirming that covenant. God is very keen on doing that in the Old Testament. The people that he makes these covenants with, he wants to continuously remind them, here's what I'm doing for you. Here's what I promise you. And as long as you serve me, these things will come to pass. After this, Rachel ends up having another son whose name is Benjamin. And this is the last son that she has because she ends up dying in childbirth. So Jacob buries her and he sets up a pillar on her tomb. And after that, Jacob decides to return to his father Isaac because Isaac is not doing well. He is in very, very old age. So Jacob goes back to him. And at the age of 180 years old, Isaac passes away. And together, Jacob and Esau bury him. So in this whole section today, we've seen Jacob finally, Jacob and Laban have a very verbal confrontation and end up making peace. Jacob reunites with Esau and makes peace. Jacob's sons punish the people who defiled their sister. They move throughout the land completely unbothered. And along the journey, unfortunately, Rachel's nurse dies, and then Rachel herself dies after giving birth to one last son whose name is Benjamin. And then when Jacob returns home, Esau is also there. And once their father dies, they're able to bury their father together. So that is the story of Jacob and Esau as it is written in Genesis. And now that we've wrapped up Jacob and Esau, the next episode, we're going to be getting into my favorite story of the Bible, which, as I've said before, is the story of Joseph. It's a pretty long story. It goes through about 14 chapters, but it's a very, very interesting story with a lot of lessons in it. So I hope y'all have enjoyed that. I hope y'all enjoyed the message today. And as usual, whenever, wherever, and however you're listening, it is an honor to be a part of your day. This has been Church and State with Spencer Sanderson.